I wanted to start off with talking to our audience about your type 1 diabetes and tell us about when you got it.
I got it February 9th, 1970. I was a junior in high school at Herbert Hoover High School in Des Moines, Iowa. And, I just started feeling like crap for months. I mean, really, and worse and worse and worse. And the same classic stuff, peeing, eating, drinking tons of water. And finally, my father was a junior in high school, so we sort of had our separate paths. And one night I was having dinner with my parents and my brother and sister, and my dad said, Jim, you know what? I had a bathroom that I just couldn't use myself. I lived in the basement. My bedroom was in the basement.
Okay.
And their bedrooms were upstairs. So the toilet I used at night was the main floor. And my dad said, Jim, if you could have a little better aim when you're peeing, he was really embarrassed to say this, try. I said, well, God, I'm peeing like 10 times a night. And my parents went, what? What are you talking about? I said, yeah, I'm getting up like every 45 minutes. And they lay in bed that night. My mom just laid awake all night listening to me get up to pee.
Right.
And called this kidney specialist the next day because we didn't know what it was. And the kidney specialist sort of looked at me and asked me questions and went, okay, I think I'm going to send you to a diabetic specialist tomorrow. I think you have diabetes. And I knew nothing about it. I knew, I knew it was something, maybe you had to take shots or something, and you could never eat sugar again. And so we went out it was my grandmother's birthday, and we went out to dinner that night. And I thought it was like my death row meal. And I got like ice cream and cake and pie. And I thought, I'll never have this again. This is it. This is the last time. And, I didn't know anything. So when I went in the next day, my blood sugar was 1,500.
Wow.
Yep.
That's got to be close to the Guinness World Record.
I don't know. I wonder what that is.
I think it's like 2,300. There is one in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the doctor who diagnosed me, said, I need you to go home, get some clothes, and meet me down at the Methodist Hospital. And then he went right next door, and I could hear every word of this conversation. And he calls the hospital, and he said, yeah, Methodist Hospital is Dr. Edward Hertko. I need a room tonight. No, tonight. I don't care. Listen, I need a bed. You listen to me. I need and he got really mad. He goes, I need a bed right now. I've got a boy with a blood sugar of 1,500. Don't tell me you don't have a bed. And I went, wow. And I didn't know what that meant. 1,500, is that good? Is that bad? And the only bed they had was on the pediatric orthopedic ward. And it was this room with all these kids in traction. And the only reason they'd be there was that they can't move around. And there were kids with like 2 broken legs, broken leg, a broken arm, broken necks. And they're all in traction. And me in my bed. And then they see me get the shot, and this nurse telling me that this is what I'll be taking from now on. And they're like, oh, God.
Wow. So that was 16, 17?
Yeah, 17.
One thing, you and I were both type 1. I got it when I was 17 in 1974. And we're both fathers. And I felt an immediate kind of kinship, when we met. That, there's something, I think people with diabetes, we have like the same blood, kind of the same family. There's sugar that goes up and down.
Yeah.
And so there's so many things I want to ask you, but I think our viewers would like to, starting there and made yourself into a successful actor, you went to Hollywood and made it.
Sort of.
Sort of. You're very modest. But did you have a dream of being an actor back then?
No, I stumbled into being. I was maybe the worst student ever. And in high school, I had 3 study halls in my senior year. I was taking half my period, or no, I had 2 study halls. And so, a third of my day was in study halls, which I did not study. I just goofed off. I was taking the easiest classes I thought I could. I didn't really care if I was going to go to college. Later, when my girlfriend told me she was going to college and where she was going, I decided that's what I was going to do, was go to school there. So I dropped a class and was going to pick up another study hall. And I thought, I doubt if they'll let me take half my day of study halls. And so I was walking around looking in windows in rooms going, okay, who do I know? I don't know anybody in this class. And I knew a couple people in the theater class. And I thought, theater? That's easy. I'll be able to get a good grade in that. And I signed up for this theater class. And the guy who ran it, Steve Pudens, who I'm still friends with.
From high school.
From high school.
Yeah.
He had me and my brother and my sister all as students. And when I walked in the room, I was just this mess. He said, I came in, books were everywhere, jackets. He went, what is this guy's deal? And he just liked me. And every day he would come up to me going, Friday, going to be there? Medea tryouts? And I said, no. I'm not trying out for anything. I'm taking this class. That's it. I'm not being any play. See you Friday. No, I'm not going to be there. And every day he came in and did this. He just go, Friday, 7 o'clock. No. And when Friday came, I went, okay, God, this is stupid. I got to go just to go so he can, look, there, you happy? I did my audition.
Yeah.
And I went and auditioned horribly. And he cast me as Creon, the king who banishes Medea from the kingdom. And I had an argument with him. I said, you can't cast me this play. I can't act. He said, you will. And from then on, I was in, I met friends and I stayed in the theater classes. And then by the end of that year, started a comedy group with a couple guys. And when I got out of, then I was going to go to college. And I would apply to Iowa State University. And the only requirement was that you be in the top half of your graduating class. Mm-hmm. And I went and met with the registrar at Iowa State, and they told me that. And I said, well, of course I am. I looked around my school and thought, of course I'm in the top half. That's easy. And I went to the high school registrar, and she said, you're in the bottom quarter. Uh-oh. I said, what? What are you talking about? I can't be in the bottom quarter. And my grades were just horrible. And I was a terrible student. And so I had to go to a junior college to get my grades up. My grades actually went down. And then I just took off and did stuff for like 3 years. I went on a bike trip to Europe. Me and a friend went over there in 1973. Rode all around. I was there for 3 months.
How was your diabetes for that? We didn't have meters back then. So.
There were no meters. There was no way of knowing what your blood sugar was.
Yeah.
Well, I spent from 1970 to 1980 never knowing what my blood sugar was unless I went to the doctor.
Right.
And getting that sort of false reading of, it's kind of high because you were nervous and whatever.
Right.
And I quit doing urine testing by then. I tested my urine for 2 years and went, this doesn't seem to match up to anything. Mm-hmm. So I quit that. And so I was 3 months in Europe on a bicycle every day, riding 100 miles every day. Never once knowing what my blood sugar was unless it was low. And, sensing. I'm still really good. I test constantly. I test 12 times a day. But I almost always know what it is. Uh-huh. It's just those few times I don't. Yeah. But I really got good at figuring out what it felt like. But again, I was on a 2-shot a day thing, took a shot in the morning and then a shot at dinner, and there was no way of correcting. And and then my friend got hit on his bicycle in Switzerland. A car hit him. And I continued on for a month by myself. I rode from Switzerland through Austria, Italy. I rode the length of Italy by myself down to the toe of the boot, Calabria, to visit my family. During the cholera epidemic of 1973, ended up in the hospital. Spent a week in the hospital
In the bottom of it, in the boot of Italy.
yeah, in Calabria. You know, Italy is not really where you want to be in the hospital, and Calabria is not where you want to be in the hospital in Italy. It's really poor. It's really poor, and it's where it's where my family's from. My grandfather came from there, and so I went to visit the family, and then ended up in the hospital, and it was a nightmare. The hospital took they wouldn't let me take insulin. They were starving me to drive this high. I had a sky high temperature, and they were going to starve it out of me. And I had one syringe, and I kept taking shots, and I would take shots, and then I would walk around the hospital, and I didn't speak in Italian. Nobody spoke English, but I had a little translating book, and I would ask people for apples and stuff like that, and try to tell them that the hospital wouldn't let me have them. I would go in the kitchen. I got to know the cook, and he would give me a bowl of soup that I would have to sit and eat really fast before the staff came in. Do you want that piece of bread? It was insane. I was there for 5 days. And finally I woke up one morning, and my syringe, I slept with it underneath my leg, and it had fallen off the bed. It was on the floor of this hospital, which was just never once swept, never once mopped the floor of the hospital in my room. There was no toilet paper in the hospital, and my syringe is laying on the ground with the cap off, and I went, oh, that's not what I wanted to see. And I went to the hospital, and I said, you have to give me a syringe so I can take my insulin. You shouldn't be taking your insulin. Why are you taking your insulin? I said, because, first of all, you have to have insulin in you, and I'm eating food. And we had this huge argument, screaming at each other. And she wouldn't give me a syringe. And I finally was punching the walls, screaming, you will give me a syringe, and swearing. It was nuts. And they did. And they didn't have an insulin syringe. They had an old glass syringe that the markings were like, I don't quite understand what these markings are. And I thought, well, I guess the 7 units I take would be 4 here. And the needle didn't fit on it. They had a giant needle that someone had to hold like this while they gave me a shot. And we did that for 2 days. And I got out and took the train back north. That was kind of, my trip to Europe was supposed to be like, I was open-ended. My ticket was open-ended, and I was going to see where I wanted to live, and I'd met these German students who said, come to Freiburg. And I said, okay, great.
I've been there.
That's what I'll do. I'll go to Freiburg. And so I was just now, this was after 3 months, and every day that I was in the hospital, my trip got a little shorter. It was like, okay, I think I'll go home at Christmas. Okay, I think I'll go home at Thanksgiving. I'll go home at my birthday. I'll go home the minute I get out of here. I just had it with Europe, with everything. And so I got out, and I had to get to London to fly home. And so I took trains, stopped in Munich for a while, and then got to London, just hung out. And it was a fabulous trip.
So you were able to get a syringe finally.
Yep.
You got your supplies.
Well, when I got back home to my
you weren't
family,
holding on to this needle like the rest of the trip.
No, when I got back, my family, all my stuff was at my family's, house, and they didn't come visit me. That was weird. I think they were just afraid of getting cholera or something. But when I got back home, I had more stuff.
So you're telling us how you got to Hollywood.
Right. You will find, talking to me, that I will go off.
No, well, you got that
Many
neat little...
tangents.
Yeah, we found that neat little bit about the hospital.
I'd done all these jobs, like a janitor. I was a roofer. Worked at a toy farm for a while, and I went, God, maybe I should be a student. Maybe that'd be better. So I applied for, a scholarship from Voc Rehab, and through some fighting, they gave it to me.
Because you have diabetes.
Yeah. And
Nice.
there's more to that story, but I won't get into that right now. I got the scholarship, and again, was just a lousy student. But while I was there, I was taking theater classes, and ran into these guys who were all MFAs in theater. They were all like, directors and actors and writers, and they were going to do a comedy thing. And I knew them, and they said, "Do you want to be in this?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool." And so I was in this comedy show we did, which was a Cliff Notes Hamlet. We did a Hamlet done by Dr. Clifford Note and his staff, where people had written him and saying, how dare you, tear up the classics like this. So they put on their own Cliff Notes Hamlet. And now there is actually a Cliff Notes. This was 1975. And since then, somebody else has done it, but we did it first. And it was just like this crazy comedy show, and I played Gertrude, and I played Ophelia, and I played Laertes, and it was really fun. And we did it at a bar, the Boulevard Room in Iowa City, and it was packed, and all these people were going, and it was free. People said, "When's your next show?" Next show, soon, real soon. Got to have one. And the bar was like, "You got to come back. Got to come back." So we wrote another show and went back and did it there. And I knew nothing about theater, and I was working with guys who were directors, playwrights, MFA actors. And so I just and I was like this I was like an energy force that was on stage with them, and they go, because I'd always been sort of a class clown. But I didn't know how to channel it. And so they just, okay, yeah, put this guy in the show because, man, he's nuts. And so I was just sort of nuts. And then over the years, I kind of learned, you don't have to be nuts all the time. And sometimes you do this. And kind of learned how to be an actor. And we moved the group was together in Iowa City for a year. Then we moved to San Francisco in 1976. We lived there for 11 years. And a friend of mine was working on it, and I started being in different things, the occasional play. Mostly we just did Duck's Breath. That's the comedy group, Duck's Breath Mystery Theater. Yes, I've had a very lucky life. I really have. I've had a very good life. So
you're in San Francisco 11 years.
11 years, and we did shows, and I did
and
occasional shows, and then a friend of mine was working in the art department on a TV pilot, and said, "Oh, Jim, they haven't cast the lead in this TV pilot. You got to come down and be in this." And I said, "Well, okay." This was 1987. I said, "I don't know how you do that. I didn't have an agent, and I just forgot about it." And then this friend of mine who's in the art department called me up and said, "Do you have a picture? Give me your picture. Send me your picture." And so I sent her my picture, and she took it into the director and the casting director. And they were doing this pilot about a cartoon hero called Captain Justice, who's just like Superman, just a square, Captain Justice. And his world is in one of the cartoons. Everything gets all shaky and kind of fades, and all of the characters, good guys, bad guys, go, whoa, what was that? And this character says, Captain Justice says, "Oh God, I know what this is. This happened to so-and-so and so-and-so. They're going to do it discontinuous." And so he comes to the real world, Captain Justice does, to, hey, don't forget about us. And so he's a superhero in the real world. And he has no powers. All his superpowers disappear. And it was very sort of Purple Rose of Cairo. Really funny, really great script, really, heartfelt. And so I went in and auditioned, knew nothing about audition. I'd never auditioned really for anything. And so I didn't know the protocol of any of this. And my girlfriend, I was living in San Francisco, and my girlfriend at the time, I got food poisoning the night before, was up all night puking. And then we were going to drive the next morning to LA for a 4 o'clock audition. And I was up all night puking. And she said, at 8 o'clock, we gotta go. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I can't even open my eyes. Screw this. I don't need this. I'm not gonna get this. Why am I driving down there for this stupid? Get up, Jim, get up. I said, no, I can't. Get up, Jim, get up. And she's now my wife. Made me get up. She just made me get up, and we drove down. I arrived. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know what I told you. All I knew was it was a superhero. And so I went in and I read the stuff, and I looked like crap. I'd slept half the way down, and they said, "Jim, are you okay?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm really sick." And did you read the script? Do you understand what the part is? And I said, "No." Okay, you know what? Can you take the script home? Get a good night's rest, all right? Go get a motel, get a good night's rest. Come in tomorrow. Let's try this again. I went, wow, that seems very nice. And it's just, I looked like what they kind of wanted, kind of American, blonde hair, blue-eyed, goofy. And I went and read the script and went, oh, I get this guy. He's like this cornball Iowa guy who says the corniest things in the world, but really believes them. Really, like, because that's what he is. That's how he was drawn.
Right.
And I went into this audition, and it was like I did the 2 scenes they wanted me to do, and they were like, okay, great. Turn to page 62. Turn to page 62. Read that scene. Let's try that scene. I was like, okay. And I read that scene. You know what? Oh, God. Let's turn to page 106. And I was just flipping through this thing, reading all these scenes, and they were really excited. They were like, and when it finished, they walked me to the door, the director and the producer and the casting director, walked me to the door going, okay, now, do you have tape? Is there any tape on you? And I said, well, I have some tape on me up at home. Send it to us as soon as you get home. When are you going to be home? Are you going to be home today? No, I'm driving back up. Okay, as soon as you get it, send it. And so I sent them a tape. And then they brought me down, and I went through this process of auditioning for a pilot, which I knew nothing about. And it's intense, because you go in these rooms and there's all these people, and it's like they all look like the part to you. Oh, there's the perfect guy for this. Oh, there's the perfect guy for this. I'm an idiot. And I ended up getting this part. And it was, supposed to be this superhero. When the director took me in to the producers, you go into a big room of producers. She goes, this woman, Claudia Weil, said, "Do you have shoulder pads in that sweater?" I was wearing this cardigan sweater. I said, "No." And she goes, "Oh, Jim." Rips out her shoulder pads and sticks them in my shirt. Goes, there you go. And the rest of the guys being brought in were all like, these muscle gods. Big, muscly guys. And clearly she wanted me to get this part.
Right.
And I got it, and we shot the pilot, and it was just like, wow, this is the life for me. And the people in this were Milo O'Shea, Irish actor with big eyebrows, fantastic actor. Robert Forster, who was just nominated for an Oscar a couple of years ago. And it was, and me. And I'm in with these like heavy hitters, and I loved it. I was so happy. It was like, this is what I wanted to do. And they showed the pilot. They picked it up. They bought 13 shows. They flew me around the country. They flew me to New York to meet the major advertisers. And it's all this is a new world to me every step of the way. It's like, wait, what am I going to do? You're going to go meet the major advertisers in New York. Okay, how do I get there? Oh, well, Jim, everything will be taken care of. And from that point on, it was like limousines, first class tickets. Here's 2 first class tickets for you to go to New York. Really? Wow. And the limousine picks me up, takes me to the airport. We get there, there's a limousine to take me to the Ritz Hotel, Ritz-Carlton Hotel.
It was really just like that, just rags to.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
quite
at the
riches,
time,
but-
I had been making my living doing Duck's Breath shows, and we had kind of slowed to a crawl. And I was actually, what I was doing for money was doing yard work for friends. I had friends who had a giant yard in San Francisco, and I was doing yard work for them, moving stones, stuff like that.
Heavy labor.
Heavy labor, and I also lived I always did. I always lived very hand to mouth kind of. I spent a year and a half just being a house sitter, no place to live, kept everything in storage. So it's like, I'd done a lot of stuff to do this, but I hadn't done anything in LA. It was just like boom. So I get hired, and they pick up the show. They're going to do it on Saturday nights, and then I get fired. Like a month and a half before shooting it, I'm about to do a show in Seattle with the Ducks, and I was leaving my room, and I get a call, and it was this guy who worked for the production company, saying, "Jim, hi Jim, yeah, this is his name, and Dusty K, who was the guy who wrote it and produced it. Got a minute?" And I had just talked to them like 2 weeks before about story ideas. They'd flown me down to LA to talk about story ideas.
Wow.
And it was like, God, I'm living the best life in the world.
Yeah.
And ABC had sent me, it was going to be on ABC. ABC had sent me a check a week before for $3,000 to move from San Francisco to LA. It was like, life was really, really good. And you got a minute? And I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, well, there's just been a whole bunch of stuff, and he went into the whole rigmarole, and we're going to have to let you go. And I thought it was a joke because, I talked to these guys a lot, and I said, oh no, oh shoot, well, what am I going to do? And, well, don't worry, blah, 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 and, we fought and fought for you, and finally they just said, and I kept joking with them and playing along with their joke, and finally, after like 10 minutes, I said, hold on, wait a minute, is this real? Am I seriously fired? Yeah. And it was like, God, no. Do you guys understand the hundreds of people I've been telling on planes to watch the show? It was like somebody punched me in the stomach.
Wow.
And I drove to the show. We had 2 shows that night. And I drove to the show, and I walked in, and the guys in Duck's Breath were all unpacking stuff, and they went, what's wrong? I said, what? And I wasn't going to tell them till after the show. I said, what? What do you mean? They went, Jim, what happened? I just looked horrible. And I said, I got fired. You got what? I got fired. I'm not doing the show. And the shows that night were just sheer agony. They were really, really hard.
The Ducks. Right.
And then we continued on this we were on a little Northwest tour of Seattle and Portland and all this stuff. And one day we were on a Portland TV station promoting our show in Portland. And it was the ABC affiliate. And that's how we got on, was that and the people on the show didn't know that I had been fired. And so we did a little skit on the show, and there's a live audience of, mostly housewives and stuff.
And wait, and they replaced you on that TV show, or did they?
They replaced me. It took them a while, but they did replace me.
And the show went on, the 13 shows.
Well, no, I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
So we're on the show, and after our little skit, she comes over and she interviews us about the show that night, and then she says, "And Jim, I understand you are going to be the star of an ABC pilot." And I said, This is live on the air. And I went, no, you didn't. You didn't get the last thing. I'm sorry. And it was like stutter, stutter, boom. And I said, no. I got fired. I got fired by ABC. Okay. And we'll be back.
Go to commercial.
So I got home and I got a call from a reporter who knew somebody in ABC, and he called me up and said, "So, Jim," and he'd already interviewed me because he'd talked to this guy about how they're going to really push the show. And he said, "I'm sorry about what happened." And this wasn't public. He said, "I'm sorry what happened. Do you know why it was?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You weren't handsome enough." And that's what it was. So I got fired because I wasn't handsome enough. So they ended up casting a guy, honestly, who looked like me, but was really handsome, who later went on to do Baywatch, and was a really nice guy. I met him a couple times. He was a really nice guy. But
Well, you've just given us this whole look of Hollywood that starts out glamorous and then getting kicked off and then being told something that you would never hear in another job.
no,
You don't lose your job from not being handsome enough,
Yeah.
except in Hollywood.
yep. So
So you
that was a awakening. They had to sort of pay me off, which was nice. I got a check from them every week for 7 weeks for doing nothing. And the good thing is that it turned into, I had also shot at the same time these spots for MTV, and
the Randy spots.
the Randy spots, and they called up right after I lost the job and said, "We want to talk to you. We want to run you for president in 1988." And I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so that enabled me to go, moved it, and they paid for me to move to New York. And I lived in New York for 4 years and worked for MTV, and that was fabulous. You know, I couldn't get rich off it like I could have on the TV pilot, but it was great. And then I got, I sort of was tired of New York and thought, well, it's time to move to Los Angeles for real. I want to be, an actor, and that's where you got to be.
Yeah.
So I moved to LA, and a year and a half of just nothing.
Just trying out.
Oh, trying out lots and lots of auditions.
A year and a half.
Nothing. I mean, it was desperate. And I started doing that thing where borrowing money from credit cards to pay the rent. Going to a cash machine with an American Express card, putting it in, going, getting $200, putting it back in, $200, getting, the $1,800 for rent. And those were hard times.
I bet.
And moving, and then, okay, this credit card's 18%, but they offered me this one for 5.9%. Shift it over. And once you start that kind of stuff, then it's a vicious,
Yes.
horrible cycle. And so I did that for a while. Had the occasional job, not much. And I think in '94 was when it started to loosen up. I was doing a show. I continued to do live shows, and I came up with all these different live shows. And one of them that I came up with was called Girly Magazine Party, and it was a parody of Playboy After Dark, the old Hugh Hefner show. Where it's a bunch of swinging cats and chicks
Right.
sitting around a cool flat, listening to music, having deep discussions with comedians, and we did a parody of that, and at this theater called Theater in Los Angeles, and we had a bar on stage. We had a guy who made us martinis. We drank live martinis on stage and improv this show once a week, Friday nights at like 10 o'clock.
Wow.
And it got to where it was people coming every single week. We packed it every week. And it was, you never knew what was going to happen at this show. It was like, because we're improvising and because we're drinking, it just the shows were insane, and eventually, and we still do them. We've learned to taper the drinking, and so now I have a drink at the beginning, and then I just do the rest of the show. But it's a really nice way to start a show, is having a gin martini. And that got bought up as a movie. These guys kept coming to see it and finally said, you want to do it as a movie? So we did it as a movie. It never got released. It got changed a lot. It was like they took the idea and then just changed it to like, oh no, this isn't. And the people that made it, I think, are embarrassed that they made it, and it's not embarrassing. It's okay, but
Now, through these, does the diabetes ever held you back from anything? Any more crises? Pass out on the set?
never.
No, diabetes didn't hold you back at all.
I don't think diabetes ever held me back from anything. I was the 10 years that I spent not knowing what my blood sugar was. I also didn't have very many doctors during that period, because I'd go to doctors and it was like, I know how to do this. I know how to make minor adjustments, and there wasn't any fine tuning. And maybe I just didn't meet the right doctors, but it just I read everything I could get. And do you know June Bierman, Barbara
Yes,
Toohey?
yes.
Their first book, The Peripatetic Diabetic,
Yes.
completely changed my world. It really did. Because I read it and it was like, oh, this is funny. They're having fun. And, it's really informational, and it's got a ton of, they're funny. And I wrote him a fan letter like that as soon as I read it. I got a reply back within a week. And this crazy letter with all these stamps. They used to stamp everything. They had these rubber stamps, people carrying syringes and stuff like that. And I became friendly with them, and I would come down to Los Angeles to go visit them. And they really did. They kind of changed my life, because they got me to think about it in a not horrible way. It was just like, look, just deal with it. You got to deal with it the best you can, and you'll make mistakes, and you'll learn. And I did. I constantly experimented with diets, with lots of things, and was.
They later went on to do low carb, and I was close to June and Barbara. Wonderful, wonderful women. Really a blessing to the diabetes community, all the things they did.
Yeah.
They have the glucose energies. Did you ever get? They would import these glucose tablets that were just the best thing for treating low blood
Oh
pressure.
yeah.
They
And they've
kind
gotten-
of they had it all down.
They had the sugar-free center,
Yeah.
and I guess June recently had a stroke, and I talked to Barbara, and she said, this why does she get everything? Like, she gets the diabetes, the stroke.
Yeah.
And I think they're working on a book about strokes right now.
Oh,
They've
good for
kind of,
them.
yeah.
So you tried all these different diets. Did you try low carb,
Yeah,
vegetarian?
I just tried everything that
Test to
seemed, and I didn't know. I eventually went to the Mayo Clinic to get tested, because my uncle was a doctor there, and I said, "Can you get me in? Because I think I should be looked at just to see where I
checkup.
am." And I ended up in a huge argument with a doctor who told me I had to change my lifestyle if I was going to be a diabetic. And I said, well,
if you're going to be,
well, yeah. I mean, since you are, you have to, and he
Right.
really did. He said, you have to change your lifestyle. Because at the time I was doing all this, it was 1980, all this touring with
Right.
my comedy group, and, getting up different times every day, eating at different times every day, and it was always like an adjustment. And I went there to find out what my health was, and to say, look, there's got to be something better, right? You guys can show me something that will help me. And they said, change your lifestyle. And I said, well, I can't. This is what I do.
Right.
It's what I
It's
love
my
to
career.
do. And this is what I do. What do you mean, change
Yeah.
my lifestyle? And we got into it, and they yelled at me. And this doctor told me, your diabetes will never make adjustments to you. You have to make adjustments to your diabetes. And I said, well, yeah, I agree. I'm willing to do that, but I'm not willing to do this. Help me figure this out. And the only thing that they did good then was they turned me on to the old chem strips.
Uh-huh.
I didn't even know that they were out. And so I started, doing that. There was no meter. It was,
That's
wipe
how
it
you
off.
got your answer.
Yeah.
Really.
And then eventually, 3 years later, met a doctor in San Francisco, Dr. Peter Forsham.
Yes. He was on my radio show.
Really?
He's brilliant.
Oh.
He passed away long since.
Yeah. And
He was your doctor?
yeah,
No wonder you're so healthy. The guy was a leader.
yeah.
He was
And I
far
went to
away the
him.
best diabetes doctor in the day.
There's another story of being an opening act for a rock band for 5
Uh-huh.
weeks
Uh-huh.
that I was seriously falling apart doing. I mean, because I was a comedian opening for a rock band all over the United States. And it was a different show every night, and a different show where I was being screamed at and yelled at and booed and having things thrown at me every single night. And I started in that time just sort of, my diabetes was just not really that important. And I started just eating whatever, and eating for satisfaction, like eating just to make me happy for 1 second, drinking a lot. And I came off that tour and I went, okay, I'm on my way to a disaster here, and I need help, and I don't know how to do this. I really don't. And
And let me just say, it's tough figuring out when to take your insulin, how much. The tools were so crude, and you didn't have anyone looking over your shoulder
no.
helping you.
And I was still on like a 2-shot-a-day routine
Right.
through this.
And so then you found Peter.
So I asked a friend, and he called his family back east, who were big in the medical fundraising establishment. And he said, a friend of mine's diabetic, San Francisco. Who's the best guy? And that's how this friend of mine, Ned, works. Who's the
Right.
best guy?
Right.
Don't tell me other people. Who's the best guy? And they said, well, Peter Forsham. Peter Forsham. And he was at UCSF at the time. And so I called this guy and got in to see him. And he was, just, first of all, hysterical.
He
had
has
the
type 1
driest-
diabetes.
Had type 1 for 50 years.
Right.
And I said, look, here's the deal. I think I want to be like on more shots. If I take more shots, I think I'll be more controlled. He said, exactly. You have to take more shots.
Right.
He said, you can't. He goes, the pancreas doesn't put a whole bunch of insulin in your system in the morning. There you go. Good luck. That's not how it's done. It's a little bit at a time. Yeah. And he helped me get on this multiple shot routine. And
With the chem strips. You were testing your blood by then.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And just, he really did. He saved my life.
Yeah.
And I love going to see him. I love going to the doctor because he was such a odd guy. He had the strangest little sense of humor, and I still have letters from him that are very funny.
Really, I had him on my radio show, and I'd love to do a tribute someday, so save those letters.
Love to.
Okay.
Yeah. So he kind of got me on the straight and narrow that I've been on ever since. And
so the minutes we have left, our viewers would like to know sort of the nuts and bolts. You get up, tell us like how many units you take, what kind of insulin, what kind of breakfast you have, and then tell us about how you manage your day. And
okay.
I know you told me your A1C is 5.9, which is excellent. It's most people don't succeed at that, so teach me.
I get up in the morning. The first thing that happens when I get up in the morning is my kit is there. Before I get out of bed, I test my blood sugar, and whatever it is, if it's lowish, it's usually kind of lowish, 70, something like that, which I like for sleeping. I like it that low.
Wake up with a 70.
I do not like waking up with high blood sugar. I do not. If my blood, I hate it. I hate sleeping with high blood sugar. It's awful. I would rather take a little risk of low blood sugar,
right,
than high, because it's just makes me feel like my skin is crawling. And I get up, have a cup of coffee, read the paper, test my blood sugar.
What's in your coffee?
Half and half.
Half and half. Okay. Because that'll raise your blood sugar a little bit, won't it?
A little
Just by
bit.
itself? Yep.
And so after my coffee and the paper, which I usually take a while to do, if I'm working, it's all.
This is your home schedule.
Yeah, this is just.
Yeah.
And then I'll test my blood sugar again. It's usually raised a little bit. I'll take 7 units of Humalog
Okay.
and have a variety of different things. Sometimes I have eggs with cheese, glass of milk. Sometimes I will have oat bran with pecans and wheat germ, which I find is a great. It looks like it's a lot of carbs, but it really isn't because there's a lot of fiber in there. And
Oat bran. You can
not
buy that at the
oatmeal,
grocery
oat
store?
bran.
Oat
Yeah,
bran
just
at the health food store or the grocery
no. I just go to the regular grocery
store?
store.
Oat bran.
It just the only difference is it's like oatmeal except it has more fiber.
Right, because those breakfasts you can't. The eggs are so different from
Yeah.
the cereal breakfast that I would need like 3 times as much insulin for the cereal breakfast.
Uh-huh.
So you're balanced. You're giving the milk with the eggs, and it's really bran, and the 7 units covers both those breakfasts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I have 1 piece of toast with peanut butter and a glass of milk. The other thing that's very lucky for me is that I don't need a lot of food. I can completely skip lunch. I eat lunch a lot simply out of boredom, or if I'm with people that are eating lunch, I'll eat lunch. But I honestly can eat a piece of toast or have my oatmeal or my 2 eggs in the morning and not eat until the next day. That
Dinner.
doesn't until breakfast the next day. I can miss lunch and dinner easily. It doesn't bother me. I don't get hungry.
Wow.
And that is it's like a. So at lunch, for instance, when everybody's getting crabby, I will only get that way if my blood sugar's low. If my blood sugar's dropped. And what I'll do if I skip lunch, I will have to take I'll have to test into the mid-afternoon, 2 o'clock, and now my blood sugar has climbed up to 180, 220. Okay, I'll take a couple units to bring it down, and then just eat dinner.
So just so we're all wondering, you took a basal the night before?
Yes, I take 12 units of Lantus at bedtime.
That's it for your basal?
Yeah.
Wow. I take 12 Lantus twice a day just to manage my basal. It's just how we're all so different.
Yeah. Yes.
And then you take 7 units of Humalog.
For breakfast.
And then no insulin if you don't have lunch?
No insulin, but I know that I got to sort of beyond that.
You need to take a unit if it starts
yes,
going up.
Yeah.
And then dinner's the same thing. You don't.
And if I do eat lunch, I'll have. It's usually like I will. I love it when my blood sugar is like 90 to 120 when the food arrives.
Right.
So that I can look at it and go, okay, and then decide on the dose.
Right.
I don't like ordering, a sandwich and then taking the shot and then waiting, and then the sandwich comes and it goes, oh, this is
Not enough.
this is not enough food.
Right. I know what
So
you
I always like to have my blood sugar right around 100 so that I can take the Humalog and it starts working almost immediately.
And you draw it up with a syringe or use a pen?
Syringe.
In it from a vial, from a large vial?
Yep.
Okay. Have you ever mixed up the Humalog with the Lantus?
Never.
They're both clear?
Never. I once,
People do that. I have friends that have done that.
one time, I was at this thing, the Bohemian Grove. I went to the Bohemian Grove.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. A friend of mine is in the Grove. So I went to their big thing, and I'd never been. And it was like, I was expecting to hate it, but I actually liked it.
I've never been to a party there. What?
It's insane. And it's all men. And I thought, all men, and the way they're drinking, this is going to be trouble. It's like 2,000 guys in this 4 or 5 days. I really shouldn't be talking about this. But anyway, I'd gone out that night, and I'd gone from cabin to cabin with a bunch of friends, and I had a lot to drink. And I came home, and I tested my blood sugar, and it was like 64. And I went, okay, I got to get something to eat. And I had like a glass of juice or something like that. And then I was drawing up my Lantus, to take my Lantus, my 12 units of Lantus, and I took it, set everything down, was about to brush my teeth, and I went, wait a minute.
Purple cap.
Wait, what did I do? What did I just do? Oh my God, I took the wrong one. I took 12 units of Humalog
Yeah.
before going to bed.
Yeah.
And I went, 12 units is,
Yeah. You could die.
12 units is just gigantic. And I went, and everybody's asleep. Everybody's
You're
asleep.
in Bohemian Grove
And I'm in
itself.
Bohemian Grove.
And where's
and I
the
go,
kitchen?
okay, what do I do? What do I do? Oh, God, Jim. And so I went in the kitchen, and I had 2 gigantic bowls of Wheaties with sugar. And I just put lots of sugar. I went, okay, I hope I know what's going to go on. I hope that I wake up tomorrow with high blood sugar, because,
Right.
and I'm going to make sure of that. But I don't know, like 12 units and I woke up my friend before I went to bed, and we're in this cabin together, and I said, okay, not to scare you, if you get up in the middle of the night, just grab my arm. If I'm really sweaty, maybe wake me up, because I took 12 units of insulin, and insulin that I shouldn't have taken. And he went, what? And then I laid down, went to bed. He goes, Jesus, why would you? Thank you. Thanks a lot for doing this to me. And he laid awake,
Worrying about
I
you.
slept. And I slept, and I woke up with a, sky high blood sugar. And the only time in my life I've ever gone, yes, 300, yes. Because I was really afraid.
Yeah.
I've only been revived once by paramedics in 37 years, and I'm very proud of that. And the revival thing was also a stupid drinking thing that I'm ashamed of. And that's the thing, is that you can never. The way I manage myself is just kind of all the time. It really is. It's just constant management. No matter what I'm doing, one little part of me is just worrying all the time, going, what are you? Where are you? Are you going
Did you
low?
take your shot? Are you gonna
Do I
test?
do this? Do I do this? And I'm constantly. That's why I'll test. I'll test no matter when. I don't care. I test a lot because I need to know exactly where I am, and I'll test to find out where I'm trending.
Right, going up, going down.
And because that's very important. And to do this thing that I did where I had to be revived was like, man, just despicable. And I'd been at a party, had a lot to drink. It was a barbecue, but the barbecue didn't get going until midnight. And I went, okay, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I played basketball for 3 hours that day. And when I was leaving, I tested my blood sugar, and it was 350. And I went, oh, God. So I took a shot, took 6 units of Humalog to bring it down. I got home. It was still 350. It was like an hour and a half later. I went, okay, it should have moved
come down
something.
yeah.
But it didn't move at all. And it's the case, like, is this one of those cases where sometimes it seems like this for 2 weeks every year, my insulin doesn't work? I took a shot, and it's like it doesn't work. And so I thought, well, that's it. It didn't. But you know what, Jim? That's scary. Take another shot to bring it. You know what? If I wake up, I'll wake up just all sweaty, and that'll be fine. I'll live with that. So I took another shot. I took another 6 units. And then I woke up having this dream where all these guys were telling James, somebody named James, to do something. James, do this. James, do that. James. And nobody ever calls me James, which is funny. And finally, my eyes kind of open like this. And I see a face right here. And it's this guy in a uniform. And I like this, and looked around, and there's a whole bunch of guys in uniforms, and they're in my room. But I didn't know I was in my room. You know, where I was it was such a, it was sort of familiar, but I didn't know what familiar was.
Yeah.
And there's a woman on the bed next to me, kind of looking at me like this, going, come on, there you go, there you go. And as soon as I opened my eyes, all these voices said, there you go, James, okay, James. And my wife starts talking to me, and I didn't know who she was. I knew she looked familiar to me.
Had they given you some glucose?
Oh
IV?
God, there was the stuff going on my veins.
Right.
They had those monitors all over me, taped to my
Right.
chest.
A little invasion of privacy there.
And I always sleep naked. And my wife said that I had been kicking when they came in. She kept trying to cover me up with the sheets, and I kept kicking them off and thrashing.
Yeah.
And she kept trying to cover me up, and they said, "Ma'am, it's okay. We've seen it all." So eventually I came to, and the weirdest thing happened. They said, he's got to, and I honestly didn't know anything. I mean, the place I was so far away.
Yeah.
And
happy?
no, really miserable. And they said, we need to, do you know his doctors? This was on a Sunday. This is Mother's Day. And do you know his doctor's phone number? This is after I was a little bit revived. Do you know his doctor's phone number? And I went, 310-652-3870, extension 6. And everybody goes, what's that? I said, well, it's my doctor. Then they wanted to take me to the hospital. And I said, I don't think I need to go to the hospital. I think
Right.
there's nothing to do. I'm awake. I just need to eat, and I can eat. I'm going to eat. It's not like I'm going to refuse to eat. I'm going to eat. And they insisted, and they put me in the ambulance. Never been in an ambulance before. And that was kind of cool. I was just sitting in the ambulance and, wow, it's an ambulance. I tested my blood sugar in the ambulance. It was like up to 120 now. I thought, this is silly to be going there. And their only job in the hospital was to give me something to eat, and it took an hour and a half to get a sandwich delivered to my room. So,
Jim, I think you're an inspiration. How you handle your diabetes, how you found the path for yourself through trial and error.
yeah.
And many of us are, we provide all the treatment for our disease, so we're the doctor.
Yes.
We are the diabetes doctor deluxe for ourselves. And that's why that doctor didn't want you. He said you can't have that lifestyle because he didn't know how
Right.
to titrate your insulin.
Right.
And he was afraid. So that's they want to rubber stamp everybody, but it's not like that today as much.
No.
People can work graveyard, swing shift, be actors. But
Yeah, and mine came about simply from trial and error. It really was, and a lot of it was a lot of error. I made a lot of errors. I screwed up big time. But every time I did, I made notes. Okay, remember this.
yeah.
And I'm in, considering I've had it this long, I'm in really good health.
Well, it's easy to understand why these good things happen to you because you kind of put off this great energy,
Well, thank
You're a nice guy, and I can see people wanting to give you things. Yeah. So it's been great having you on our show.
Thank you.